That's Jack Kirby. He just did, you know, with Stan, I have to say with Stan, created 15 new characters. Oh, really? People at DC Comics go, who's doing that over at Timely? It's not Timely, it's Marvel Comics. Maybe we should hire some new artists. They were very dull and strange, very hard to work for. They didn't read their own comics. You would think they would. You would think they would. So when Denny and I did things like, attack the Vice President of the United States in a comic book, they were always surprised that some governor of some state would write a letter saying they were going to take all their comic books off the stands in their state if they ever did such a thing again. And the executives at DC Comics came to us and said, "What's this all about? Don't you read the comics, guys?" "Oh, well, that's not the point. What's this all about? You attack the Vice President?" "Yeah, and the President." "Well, what are we going to do?" "Well, I guess we're just not going to do it again. We're on to other things." "All right, just so long as you don't do it again." So they were done. You know, guys in suits, automatically you put a guy in a suit, he becomes stupid. Unless you put a cartoon tie on him, and then he's got a voice into the creative field. "Oh, you got a cartoon tie. Is that Taz?" "Yeah, it's Taz. My kid gave it to me. Now we can talk comics." So they're just dumb. And it's not so much that they were stupid. You know, there's a difference between dumb and stupid. Dumb is like, what are we doing here? Stupid is, somebody just dropped a rock on my head. What's going on? It's a rock. Oh. So, stupid, you can do lots of other things, but not necessarily no comic. Dumb is you're just dumb. Okay. So any more questions? I know that was a rather rambling and silly comment, but you gave me the opportunity and I did it. Anybody else?
So,
yes, sir.
Those books you were talking about, there was a lot of political and social commentary there, and then it seemed like that stuff just went away. And then it obviously came back in the... Like,
boy, I can explain that to you.
Why do you think it took so long to catch on?
Back in the olden days when we were knocking rocks together and we did those comic books, before you were nice enough to ask my sons questions and ask me questions, we had a thing called comic books on the newsstand. Remember the newsstand? And they sold comic books there. They didn't have comic book stores, direct sales market. So what they would do is they would send the comic books to the newsstand. They'd sell hundreds of copies to the newsstand. But they didn't sell them, they just sent them. And so what happened was, they had a thing called an affidavit return. Okay, this is a smart conversation, so if you're stupid, get out of the room. It's called affidavit return. Affidavit return meant if the local distributor of the 410 distributors around America decided to write down, we just destroyed 7,000 comic books, all they had to do was then sign it at the bottom. And then they would walk out to the back of their store where there was a back of their warehouse where there was a table. And guys in vans, who later became comic book store owners, would drive up in their vans, and they would get out and go up there, and there would be this big table of Playboy magazines and Penthouse magazines and comic books. And they would buy some of the comic books. They would buy Barry Smith comic books, Bernie Wrightson comic books, Jim Steranko comic books, Neal Adams comic books, but not the other ones, because they knew they had friends in the local town or vicinity that they could sell those comic books to for, instead of 15 cents, $3. Those same guys own your comic book stores now. Those same guys were smart enough to make money off of those comic books that the comic book companies were too stupid to know what was going on. So what DC Comics would tell me was, you know, that Green Lantern, Green Arrow, it's a great comic book and kids seem to love it, but it doesn't seem to be selling very well. But of course it was selling very well at the back of the warehouse, while guys were signing affidavits that they destroyed them. So all the good comic books from those days did very well with the beginning, those nascent guys who were going to have comic book stores a few years later. And that's how the direct sales market has happened. And that's why everything that's happening here today exists. Those thieving SOBs who went to the back of the warehouse and bought those comic books from the other thieving SOBs who signed affidavits to DC and Marvel comic books. Everybody was lying and conning DC and Marvel comic books, and they were running their own business. And then suddenly, when the direct sales market opened up and comic book stores opened up, there was a whole bunch of guys who were smart enough to own comic book stores. The first wave of them was 1,500 of them across America. Bang! Open comic book stores within 2 years. Because they were already making money off the good comic books. So, why did it stop? Going back to your question, why did it stop? Because they, DC Comics, thought it wasn't selling. Meanwhile, I'm out on the floor signing mint-condition copies of every one of those copies that apparently didn't sell. That guys have been cracking out of boxes in the last couple of years selling, oh yeah, I can sell you this for $140. You said get them on the floor. You can get them on the floor from between $20 and $140, some of them even more. It was a bullshit business. It was all corrupt and crazy, and the comic book companies had no idea. Do you think DC or Marvel Comics sent a guy, either in a suit or not in a suit, around to the warehouses to see that table in the back of the warehouse where the vans would drive up and buy those comic books off the table? Not a chance. Next question.
For Josh, can you tell us about what a typical day at Continuity is like?
I don't know. I got out of there as quick as I could. Well, it's a family business, so we're all there, as little as we try to be, but we're all there. And Dad runs the show, but really my oldest sister runs the show, and it's a lot of I don't know. You ever for Thanksgiving dinner, it's like Thanksgiving dinner except you're all trying to get the same job done, and someone's done something wrong and we can't admit which one it is. It's like that.
Josh has been out of Continuity for a long time. Every once in a while he comes back to visit, like he visits an old prison. Same thing with Joel. Joel runs the LA studio of Continuity, and he is in control of all the animators that come in, the stuff that we do for the Nason XP commercials and stuff like that. And he tries to fit his own stuff in between that stuff, but it's a little bit of a burden. Josh is out for the most part doing internet comics. Are you guys aware of Blind Ferret? Who's aware of Blind Ferret in here? Thank you. Tell us about Blind Ferret. Shh. Blind Ferret. Yeah, I'm asking you. Forget it. Josh, tell us about Blind Ferret. Tell us about Blind Ferret.
It's actually a webcomic company. They produce about 6 to 10 different webcomics, and in July I'm going to be launching my own with them. And unlike the comic industry where the top-selling book will get, I don't know, 150,000 copies sold, Blind Ferret, their webcomics get every day a new one comes up about 250,000 viewers. So my first day launching a comic, I'll have more viewers than the best-selling comic out there.
Think about that.
For how does revenue for webcomics work? It seems to be mainly advertisement-based revenue.
It is,
and then also collecting a graphic novel at the end and selling that.
That is actually, it's basically what it is. The amazing thing is when you create a community of webcomics like Blind Ferret has, suddenly you have each webcomic is get the same viewer, and it's free, and if just a small percentage of them click through for the advertising, then the webcomic has paid itself over multiple times. And then the publishing kind of becomes a little extra special thing at the end of the day where you get a nice book out of it. But it's not even that necessary because the ad revenue will pay for a webcomic quite easily.
Oh, really?
Do they share, Josh, does the publisher share the advertising income with you?
Yes, it is a shared revenue, so it's sort of a shared revenue after cost kind of deal. So once the publisher recoups their cost, then the ad revenue is split 50-50.
So basically, they advance Josh a given amount of money to do the pages, and then at a particular time, they share the revenue of the advertising that comes in. And then the third flow of income comes from the collection of the work that he's done over a period of time into a book that they sell at conventions, on the internet, and all the rest of it. It is a true sharing of income. It's not like the regular comics. It's assuming that it becomes successful, which it's sufficiently successful now to give enough income to Josh to do it. It can only grow. So the reason I'm asking you guys if you know about Blind Ferret is as soon as you go home tonight, you're going to click in on it and add more income to my son. To remember that it's all about us. Okay?
Click on the ad.
Click on the ads, especially click on the ads, right? You know, I don't know if you know it, but it's the clicking on the ads and then ignoring them that makes all the money. Because the advertisers, they don't know. So, any other questions? Yes?
How early on did you guys know you were going to follow him saying, you know, family business?
I don't think there was ever a time where we didn't feel like we were artists. It was, I grew up, you know, grab a scrap of paper, start drawing on it, create our own characters, start doing our own little comic books. So to me, there was never a time where it didn't seem a part of us to do. I mean, and I've been around a lot of kids now, and I worked out at Saban where I went to children's hospitals and we did charity events with kids, and I've discovered that all little kids have the talent. It's just at some point some kids stop and others don't, and we didn't stop.
As soon as I realized I was too short to be a pro wrestler.
Yes?
I was just wondering, years ago when you became more outspoken as an artist.
Who is you? Neal.
Neal.
My name is Neal.
An artist advocate. Did that have any effect with publishers reluctant to work with you because you were so outspoken?
Look at this smile. What's this? Could you resist that? No, I didn't act. There's some impression that I go in like a battle axe and I fight these guys. No, I go in and I smile and I say, "Hey guys, now that you know that you're wrong, why don't we return the original art? Wouldn't that be good?" And they look at me. They have that doubtful look on their faces. Is he insulting us? I don't think so. He's smiling. You understand? Like, it's sugar. It's sugar, not vinegar. You know what I mean? It's like, hey guys, I understand everybody around here is stupid, but you know, like I'll tell you a story, and I should tell you a story, but you're asking such lousy questions. I'm gonna tell you a story. So I go to Julie's work, right? My editor, right? And I say, so Julie, what do you think of the idea of having a black Green Lantern? She says, why? We got to do it. You know, it's DC Comics. You know, it sort of represents America. We got to like do that. Yeah. There's another Green Lantern. What do you mean? Well, you know, he's got another guy in case something happens to him. Who is he? Because he says, don't you know? I don't know. I don't read the comics, Julie. I'm sorry. It's a guy named Guy Gardner. Here, I'll show you. He pulls out a comic book. Apparently, in a past story, there was a guy named Guy Gardner who was still around. Blonde, Midwestern gym teacher. Julie, you know, you got this ring, you know, and the ring, and like everybody hears this in the hall, and they're going, what the hell's going on? Neal's arguing with Julie again, but nicely. Right? So I say, you got this ring, you know, comes from this guy, he dies, and he's going to find the most worthy guy on earth, and the ring goes flying around the earth to find the most worthy guy on earth, and he passes by Bruce Wayne. He passes by Superman. He passes by all the heroes in the DC and Marvel universe to settle on a test pilot. I'm okay with that. Chuck Yeager was a test pilot. Great. To me, a hero of my life, I can say, test pilot. Man, you must have balls of steel to be a test pilot. So I'm buying that, right? Now, something could happen to Hal Jordan, test pilot. Maybe you need another guy, and they'll get a gym teacher, blonde gym teacher in the Midwest. I mean, I just, no offense, but I just don't think blonde, white, Anglo-Saxon gym teacher in the Midwest. I just don't think that's the second guy. What do you mean? There's nothing wrong with that. Julie, do you ever watch the Olympics? And you see the gold and the silver and the bronze. You ever see, are they all white guys? I mean, you know, really. You know, you have Africans, you have black guys, you have Oriental Asians. You ever see all white guys? I mean, I think in archery you get all white guys. What are you driving at? I said, we've got three populations on the earth. Asian, black, essentially, and Anglo-Saxon Protestants, whatever. Don't you think that if the ring goes out, it's going to find perhaps a black guy? Somebody who's really, you know, or an Asian guy. You want a black guy, don't you? No. I take an Asian guy, I don't care. I just don't want another blonde, white, Anglo-Saxon Protestant. I don't know why. It seems stupid. You want a black? Yeah. You draw it? Yeah, sure. So, I'll get Denny to write it. Fine. Just let me tell you what he's got to be. He's got to be a guy with a profession, like an architect. Okay, that's fine. So Denny writes a script. It's a black guy. He's hassling a couple of cops who are hassling a couple of guys on the street. He's an architect. He hasn't got a job. I can understand that. Back in those days, black architect likely not to have a job. His name is Lincoln Washington. Okay, Julie. So I go to Denny O'Neill. I say, Denny, I have a feeling you didn't name him Lincoln Washington. Denny said, no, not me. Go to Julie, close the door. I'm not going to yell at Julie. I'm not going to go to Carmine. I'm not going to go to the executives. I got to solve a stupid problem. They're not going to care anyway. I go to Julie, close the door. Julie, Lincoln Washington. What? It's a slave name, Julie. I don't know how better to put that. It's a slave name. If you want to fill your office up with irate letters from every black guy in America and a crap load of white guys, you'll call him Lincoln Washington. Otherwise, you'll give him a real name. I know guys with names like that. Julie, they're slave names. It's not a good idea. Fine. What kind of a name should he have? Just a name, you know, John Stewart. How would I know he'd become a late night comedian? No idea. But that's how things got done with these people. You know, I didn't go in, you know, call a business meeting and say, let's talk about this, let's have blacks in comics. Let's make one of our heroes blacks. I snuck around, had a friendly conversation, and when the door opened, everybody was nice. I didn't rock the boat. And they didn't understand that this guy wasn't rocking the boat, but somehow shit happened. I can't explain it better than that. I find if I want to get my way, it's a spoonful of sugar, and it's not vinegar. That's all. And I never yelled at anybody, I never got upset, but we changed everything. Artists got their artwork back, we got royalties, we got better reproduction methods, mostly because my daughter went to Canada and discovered better reproduction methods in Canada. And then we printed comic books and we gave them to DC and Marvel and said, this is how your comic book should be printed. Just like that. Look, you know, it's a stupid field. You know, any of you who have actually retained your creative juices and abilities and actually have been through a reasonable amount of school are ahead of the crowd. There's a lot of stupid people doing a lot of stupid things. If you can keep your education together and keep your sense of humor and your sense of creativity and learn things, you will be a contribution to this business. I'm assuming there's some young artists and writers in here. Become a contribution, become a contributor to a business that's growing. We have sold more tickets, we have made more money in the theaters with the Avengers than any other movie that has existed in the history of film. And I have no idea what's going on with Iron Man, but Iron Man is doing fantastically, and Superman's going to show up. We are winning the world through doing good works. That's what we're doing. We are winning the world by doing good works. We should be glad and proud. There's something in the order of 70 conventions in America. There's only 52 weeks in America. This convention is one of 3 that's taking place in America right now this weekend. We're taking over the world. No offense, world. Any other questions? Go ahead.
How do you all 3 of you?
This better be for Joel or Josh. I forgot his name.
It's about photo reference. Because I know
Photo reference.
in a lot of comics today, it depends on the artist and the thing, but sometimes there's obvious tracing going on, which
obvious tracing? I recommend it.
Yeah.
No offense.
Yeah, no. But maybe that came out wrong. But
maybe you're right and I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Obvious tracing. Should we feel guilty if we trace something? How about we trace a car, a city, I don't know, a person, to get a real face, an expression on a face? Not a good idea? I think it is. All the best artists in the last 100 years in the world have traced photographs. Norman Rockwell, Bernie Fuchs, Austin Briggs, Al Parker, all the best artists in the world. So before you start your question, I just want to put that in as a little preface.
Right.
We, intelligent artists, trace. The dumb ones don't. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, how do you go about using photo reference to create your work?
How do I go about using photo? I trace. Duh. I mean, really. If you don't trace, you don't learn. Where do you think you're going to get your information from?
Yeah.
In here. You know what's in here? Nothing. It's an empty gray thing, okay? This is the world. We have beautiful and interesting people. And the sooner artists learn a little bit more about the world around them, the better they become. So the better artists are people who look at the world and learn from the world by tracing or drawing from, carrying a sketchbook in their back pocket, going to life drawing classes, drawing folds in clothing. You know how many comic book artists don't know how to draw folds in clothing? Or ears, or eyes? Almost all. They haven't learned. They haven't used their education. And you know what's going to happen? The better artists who learn those things are going to kick the worst artists out of the business because those guys don't know how to keep up. Do you think that Steve Ditko, a god in comics, could get into comics easily today with Stuart Immonen and all those guys over at Marvel Comics? I don't think so. We've passed that time. We are intelligent creatures who learn our skills. So how do you use them? Are you looking for technically how do you use them? You just find a way, because you're an intelligent person, you go ahead and do it. Lightbox, projecting, you don't project anymore.
But would you do a rough sketch first and then find a model? Depending on
Do you want to know specifically how I do it?
Depending on the level of realism
Well,
you want to go.
you can't do it. You can't take a photograph without having a layout, right? How does it, think of this.
Okay.
Think of